the differences among
Yes, sir.
Java scripting, Perl scripting, as well as Groovy scripting. In regard to that, we discussed as far as the syntaxes is concerned. The first one was about syntaxes, I think, right? Syntax readability, right? So that part was discussed in the previous session.
Sir.
So after syntaxes, even we discussed about the object-oriented programming part, because when we are working on the scripting part in reference to the programming basics is concerned, this is somewhere object-oriented programming is a base item for this. Next, even we discussed about the communities and libraries in context to the Groovy community or as well as Java community, and what are the libraries and how different are we, right? So when we are comparing from Groovy to Perl scripting and as well as Java scripting, all that. Next, even we discussed about ease of integration, because integration is also one of the key element to be focused on, because multiple applications we need to create a integration. In regard to creation of integration, how are we integrating with Java? Because normally Java libraries we use for scripting purposes. So how this can be integrated with Java is what something which we have learned so far. Today, I am going to discuss about the performance part in reference to the performances are itself is concerned. Normally, the kind of compilation, right? So the kind of compilation which normally we compile, especially using Java virtual machines, etc. All that. Majorly, when you are comparing from Perl to Groovy scripting, the performance is much higher in Groovy. Because Groovy, the baseline virtual machine, whatever we use is called Java, because Java virtual machines were there. I'll give you the scenario to you. For example, we are working on one application. There are different application we are developing. For let's say, for example, we are developing some online banking. Now, if you want to develop an online banking application or maybe of any other applications within the organization, you have to deploy the application. You have to run the application. Now, if we want to run and deploy the application, especially on the particular systems, right? So physical systems and all, what is that we require? We require to run different applications on the different systems. Am I right? Right? You require different database and servers wherein we have to deploy the application in that. But in reality, what happened in context to the virtual machines, I'm talking about this because this is where generally performance comes into picture. But when it comes to the reality, if you have seen any organization, assume that organization is using 10 different applications for different purposes. Maybe first for customer relationships and all, they may be using one application. Maybe even for managing internal backend operations, they may be using another application. So like this, there are 10 different applications will be used. So when they are using n different applications, they require multiple physical systems they require, even servers they need it, and execution you have to do in different systems. This requires a lot of infrastructure because any organization requires a lot of infrastructure is needed. So when there is a lot of infrastructure which is involved in it, obviously there is a possibility where you require a lot of infrastructure investment cost you have to maintain, right? Investment will also be in higher. At the same time, when there is an infrastructure which is allowed there, wherein equally including the infrastructure, wherein you might require to have the maintenance cost also, because maintenance cost will be very, very higher. In this regard, what we have to do, we require to create, right? So if you are creating any kind of virtual machines on a same system, in the physical system, whatever you are using, in the same physical system, if you have installed any virtual machine, because in Java applications means Java virtual machine, we install it. But whereas if you are working on the cloud environment, because most of the applications you see, most of the applications were moving towards cloud side. When we are working on cloud applications nowadays, the major thing happening is that there is a tool called Kubernetes. You might have heard about this.
Yes, sir.
The advantage in Kubernetes tool, especially when the application development is moving towards the cloud side, because most of the applications are cloud applications. You don't require any on-premise application as separate. So if it's an on-premise application, performance matters because you require proper configuration to be maintained, all that. But whereas when it comes to the cloud applications, you don't require to maintain multiple systems. It's only a cloud account. And whatever the application deployment are we doing, wherein we require some Java virtual machine, which normally in Java, if you are using Java, normally Java virtual machine will be installed. If it's a cloud application now and then, DevOps environment we are following. DevOps environment means development and operations both happens in parallel situation. That's where generally DevOps comes into picture. In this DevOps environment, the advantage is that there are multiple tools like something like Jenkins, Kubernetes, Ansible, Negois, right? So different applications are used. In these applications, one of the prominent application called Kubernetes. Kubernetes is one kind of application. Advantage in this Kubernetes application is that if you want to install multiple multiple systems in one application, multiple applications in one system, you need to install Kubernetes. That's it, right? So if you have installed the Kubernetes and all, obviously performances of the application will also be stabilized. So this is possible, especially when we are working on the Groovy and Java, because Java scripting, JVM, Java Virtual Machine is being used. But when it comes to the Groovy scripting and all, as in when we are working on the cloud applications, and if we team has been decided that we wants to move towards DevOps environment, there is a tool called Kubernetes normally we use. So that way, when we are going to write down the performance of the scripting, especially on the Groovy part, this is where this is highly useful because performance of the application will also be much higher when it comes to the compilation of the program. Because if you want to execute any program and all, we have to compile it. We need to compile the application. So compile and at the same time run the application. So to run the application, performances will be very higher because these are all the libraries, whatever we use, the kind of virtual machine, what we are using, something relating to Kubernetes if it's a cloud application. If it's an on-premise application, you may be required some Java virtual machine to be used. But whereas when it comes to the Perl scripting is not something like, because as it is a Perl scripting as a interprecedent language, normal problem is that whenever there is any compilation error, you have to execute, because if there is any kind of compile errors which you have identified so far, wherein you required some third-party tools to be installed. That's the reason why Perl scripting is, from the comparing to the Groovy as well as for the Java scripting, Perl scripting in context to the performances will be very lesser. This is also one of the difference wherein you see when we are comparing among Java scripting, Perl scripting, Groovy scripting, all that. Last but not least, when it comes to the community adoption as well as job opportunities is concerned, because this is where anyone, not only you, because anyone who are learning Groovy scripting, because of this, the reason why I mentioned this point, because community adoption is more important. It can be a Java community, right? So because Java have lot of programming, these things are there, right? So you have different applications can be used. For example, if you want to run any basic Java programming and all, different technologies like IO streaming, right? Applets, multi-threading, collection API, right? So using all these things, we can develop the core application, core Java applications. For example, if you are working on, if you required any kind of client server applications to be managed, because in the previous session, you remember I explained that, right? So when you are working on the client server applications and all, client server applications, majorly we use servlets in JSP, because servlets in JSP majorly we use for the client server applications. The third one we call it as distributed applications. Distributed applications means when there is any kind of distribution among multiple applications to be performed, there are tools like RMI, you might have heard about, called remote method invocation, RMI, Corba. These are the different applications, especially from the distributed point of view use. And nowadays, the kind of applications we are using called, of course, we are using um, enterprise applications. This is where generally enterprise edition comes into picture. So when it comes to the scripting point of view, especially Groovy scripting or Java scripting, more or less whatever the community we follow, the community is belongs to the Java community itself, right? So Java community, because baseline of Java virtual machine is only used for that regard, so that it belongs to the Java community. At the same time, when it comes to the Perl scripting is concerned, because Perl scripting is also one thing which we have to be focused more on. When it comes to the major concern, when it comes to the Perl scripting point of view itself is concerned, whatever the kind of development we have to do, everything we have to write exclusive for the Perl itself, because there are different syntaxes which are available for Perl as separate. So being into writing the Perl scripting and all, you required some kind of libraries which are used only for the Perl point of view, not from the Java libraries, because Java libraries and Groovy libraries are used and as well as available across industry or across all open source, because Java is an open source tool. You know that, right? So because whatever the Eclipse or MyEclipse IDEs we use, right? So using those IDEs and all, we can run the programs. And Java has an open source. It's an open source tool wherein this can be used extensively. But when it comes to the Perl scripting, it was not the case, because there are multiple third-party tools required for us to add. So when we are using my different third-party tools and all, next what we call execution and all everything will be difficult, because availability of libraries and all everything will also be lesser. This is where the difference you see from Perl scripting when you are comparing to Java and as well as the Groovy scripting are all about. As like as the job opportunities, as you know, because we are since a very long time, since olden days, right? So Perl scripting is being used. Now the usage of Perl scripting is completely belongs to old legacy systems, because there are different old legacy systems like mainframe applications we are using for a long time. So there generally, if they are using any kind of Perl language and all, then Perl scripting used in that regard. Otherwise, now in the present situation, in the present scenario, when we have transforming the projects to the migration side, this is where generally data migration we call it as, means from old file systems and all, now you are moving towards new file systems like XML, JSON, right? So this is where generally we are moving on nowadays. So when it comes to the opportunities itself is concerned, when you are comparing from Perl scripting, when you are comparing with Java and Groovy scripting and all, it has more edge, because one reason is that migration is happening nowadays. Most of the applications, most of the projects and systems are moving towards the new applications, means cloud environment, because of the infrastructural challenges, infrastructure cost, and all, people are moving. That is one reason. The second reason is that these are the open source tools. So open source tools doesn't require much costlier, because open source tools are available online, wherein you have to follow the instructions and you need to do the installations. Right. So that this is where generally Groovy scripting and Java scripting are more possible because of that. But when it comes to the Perl scripting and all, as I stated, old systems, whenever we are working on the old systems, this is being used. So managing the application from the Perl point of view, as well as the job opportunities and all everything will also be much lesser. So this is how generally the difference you see from Java scripting, Perl scripting to Groovy scripting is all about. So when we are working, when we are trying to understand about the Groovy scripting and as well as the base of Groovy scripting, this is what we need to see either from the syntax and readability point of view, or else it can be an object-oriented point of view, or else it can be from the community libraries point of view, or from ease of integration with Java when we are connecting with or in context to the performance or community adoption. So this is where generally you need to understand Java scripting as well as Perl scripting and Groovy scripting is all about. Is it clear to you?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Right. So Karthik, this is all about. And of course, I'm not taking session tomorrow. Monday onwards, I'll take the full time.
Okay.
Scripting, how to write the scripting is what something, because whatever we have discussed so far in these days, hardly, I think 3 days we have conducted session. So
Yes.
we have taken the basics and as well as the comparisons and all, and how to write scripting and what are the basic things required for you to write the scripting. From there onwards, we'll start. Okay, first of all, you need to learn the scripting. Then we will move into the Groovy scripting part.
Okay.
Is it clear?